I want chocolate cake now. Go buy it for me.
Lying in bed, feeling terrible, my crazy mother-in-law, Grace, demanded that I get her a cake right away. I finally lost it with this woman, who was making a racket above my head. Would you just shut up? Listen, I've got a month left to live. Go get your own damn cake, you idiot. My name is Olivia, and I'm 28 years old. I met my husband David through a friend, and we got married after dating for 3 years. We don't have any kids yet, but we're enjoying our time together. David's family owns a small factory with about 30 employees. They're doing pretty well in their area. The company was founded by my late father-in-law, and I heard from David that it grew with the combined efforts of the employees. Now David's sister Sophia is running the company as the CEO. By the way, she's not married. Sophia has a knack for business, and the company's performance has improved recently.
Must be Sophia's great communication skills, just like Mom,
David said. Sophia was indeed friendly and approachable, even to me when we first met. I'm Sophia, your sister-in-law. I'm so happy to have such a cute sister. She grabbed my hand and said this with a wonderful smile. As someone who only has brothers, I was also happy to feel like I had gained a sister. So far, it sounds like I have nothing to complain about, but that's not the case. The problem is my mother-in-law. Our company has coffee breaks at 10 a.m. and 3 p.m., and I really hate those times. And here's why. Sorry, Olivia. I'm a bit tied up. Could you get Mom's coffee? When I hear that, my mood instantly drops. The family home is next to the factory, and my mother-in-law chose to retire and stay home after my father-in-law passed away. However, she seemed to cherish this coffee break, saying, I've been waiting for you. So, Olivia, I wanted to talk to Sophia. She gave me a blatantly disappointed look. Naturally, she wasn't in a good mood, and as she was about to leave with a wry smile, she said, Hey, I have something to say to you, so sit here. And then she complains to me until the break is over. So, you've been married for 3 years and still no kids. What can I do? Having kids isn't something you can control. And if I stay quiet, she gets even more irritated. Why such a gloomy face? I wonder why David chose someone like you. Plus, given your parents, who knows how long you'll live? The sooner the better. She said that with a sigh. Hearing her say that, especially about my parents, really gets me down. And there's a reason for that. When David and I decided to get married and went to meet his family, this happened. What? You don't have parents? My mother-in-law looked shocked when I told her. Of course, it's not like I never had parents. My mom passed away from cancer when I was 10, and my dad died of a heart attack 10 years later when I was 20. My memories of my mom are vague, but my dad raised my brother and me all by himself. I deeply regret that he passed away before I could repay his kindness. When people hear about my situation, they usually look at me with pity and say, You must have had a hard time. But my mother-in-law was different. So, you might not live long either, huh? She actually said that. While I was stunned by her response,
What a rude thing to say. How insensitive.
My husband David said. Despite that, my mother-in-law kept grumbling, insisting it was an important issue. Should I reconsider this marriage? Just as I was thinking that, Sophia, who had been quiet until then, slammed her hand on the table and said, What are you talking about? Said so quietly, everyone in the room froze. Then my mother-in-law said, Right, Sophia, you agree with me, don't you? That's what she said. Sophia coldly responded, What? I told Mom, David chose Olivia himself, and she's wonderful. Why can't you support that? That's what she told my mother-in-law, with cold eyes. This seemed to shock my mother-in-law, who adores her daughter. From then on, she stopped making snide comments, except when we were alone. Even during the twice daily coffee breaks, she looked disappointed when I brought her coffee instead of Sophia. David and I rented a room near his family home, so the only time I had to endure her complaints was during those 10-minute coffee breaks. I'm so glad we don't live together. But my peace was suddenly shattered. That year, a record-breaking hurricane brought a lot of misfortune my way.
Olivia, hurry! Something terrible has happened.
I'd never heard David sound so panicked. I rushed to the living room to find it in complete disarray. What is this? Our ceiling was leaking terribly due to the hurricane. It wasn't just our room. The owner contacted us to say it was the same in other rooms. It seemed impossible to repair while living there, so we had to find temporary housing. Sophia cheerfully suggested, "Why are you worrying? Just live with us. Your commute will be 30 seconds. Sophia said that with an innocent look on her face. So, we ended up staying with David's family for a while. Welcome home, David. The leak must have been tough, but Mom is happy we can live together again. My mother-in-law greeted us cheerfully, but David mostly ignored her, like a teenager in a rebellious phase. And finally she said, "Oh, Olivia, you're here too. I didn't notice because you're so quiet. Smile more." Frustrated, my husband made a face, and all I could do was force a smile, knowing we'd be staying there for a while. After moving in together, I witnessed something quite peculiar. The first time I saw it was during dinner on our first night living together. Wanting to show my gratitude, I cooked dinner: bread, soup, and steak. It wasn't a glamorous menu, but my mother-in-law and sister-in-law said it was delicious and ate it all. I remember feeling genuinely relieved. After a while, my mother-in-law suddenly got up and brought a container from the fridge. Humming a tune, she opened it and piled a ton of its contents onto her steak.
Ugh, Mom, you're still eating that stuff?
My husband sitting next to me looked disgusted. Sophia, my sister-in-law, rolled her eyes and said, "She won't stop, no matter how many times I tell her. I've given up." She then burst into laughter. At first, I couldn't tell what was on top of the steak. Upon closer inspection, I realized it was jam. While sweet sauces on meat aren't unheard of, adding jam to a seasoned steak was just bizarre. When you eat something salty, you crave something sweet, right? That's why, she said, looking quite pleased with herself. Honestly, it gave me heartburn just watching her. For the record, I'm not a fan of sweet sauces on meat. "Come on, Olivia, why don't you try it? It's delicious," Mother-in-law said, turning to me for the first time. I didn't want to eat it either, but I forced a smile. Apparently, that wasn't the reaction she was hoping for. "I'm recommending it for a reason. You might live longer if you follow my example." With that parting shot, she retreated to her room. I was left speechless as she stormed off. My husband and sister-in-law apologized, saying, "Sorry." "Sorry. Mom's at it again with her nonsense." Apparently, mother-in-law has a serious sweet tooth and doesn't feel her day is complete without eating a cake. Amazingly, her annual health checkups always come back normal. Come to think of it, she's always eating cake during our 3 p.m. coffee breaks. I remember that. I like cake too, but not every day. It would get monotonous. And what about blood sugar levels? I've always been cautious about my health, especially since both my parents had short lifespans. So mother-in-law's jam steak was quite a shock. "Wait, does Sophia buy the cake every day?" Caught off guard, Sophia admitted. "Yeah, she makes me go buy it. She says it's embarrassing for her to do it herself. Thanks to that, I've become good friends with all the local cake shops." Sophia said, laughing. Watching this, my husband David said, "Sophia, this isn't a laughing matter. Mom's getting older.
She needs to start caring about her health.
I've always left it to Sophia to deal with Mom, and I feel bad about it. With that, my husband continued to look exasperated. Well, I think you guys will have to help out more from now on, Sophia said with a cheerful face, and I braced myself for more interactions with mother-in-law. Living with my in-laws made my commute much shorter, so I took the initiative to do household chores before and after work. I tried to engage my mother-in-law in conversation, but she often gave me the cold shoulder or outright ignored me. Despite that, she never missed an opportunity to complain about the kids during our coffee breaks.
Since moving here, I've had more bad days. Must be the stress.
My spirits were low. My husband noticed and offered multiple times to go to the doctor with me.
Let's move out and stay at a hotel temporarily,
he suggested, but I declined because it felt like a waste of money and the nearest hotel was still a bit far. Then, the worst thing happened.
A business trip for a whole week?
I was speechless at the news from my husband. The reason for my despair? Sophia, my sister-in-law, would be going too, meaning I'd be alone with mother-in-law. Yes, I'm saying that. My husband offered to take me with him, but I thought it's just a week. I hope I can handle it, especially since I still wasn't feeling well. On the day they left, Sophia sent me a mother-in-law survival guide to my phone. If anything happens, just feed her cake and you'll be fine. I couldn't help but laugh. The list included local cake shops and mother-in-law's favorite cakes from each. For someone like me, who was bracing for a tough week, this info was a godsend. In a week, our home renovations would be done, and we could move back. I thought I could manage, but that optimism crumbled on the first night. When I returned from work, mother-in-law was blocking the entrance. You know why I'm angry, don't you?
No, I don't. I'm not psychic.
Losing patience, mother-in-law snapped. You missed both the 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. coffee breaks today. Her words caught me off guard. Indeed, with my husband and Sophia away and end-of-month tasks piling up, I'd completely forgotten about mother-in-law's coffee breaks, and I myself never had a coffee break. I thought she'd understand since she used to work, but she yelled, "The moment we're alone, you start this harassment? You wicked woman!" She said that with an angry look on her face. I felt a huge disconnect with her.
Why am I getting yelled at like this? Do I deserve to be called wicked?
Suppressing my anger, I thought, it's just a few more days, and said, I did buy cake during my lunch break. It's in the office fridge. Sorry I didn't bring it. Here you go. Her face instantly changed from angry to smiling. Let's forget about today. Don't forget tomorrow, okay? She said and cheerfully went back to her room.
I'll just call her the cake demon from now on.
From then on, I never forgot the coffee breaks, knowing how troublesome it would be to upset mother-in-law. On the day my husband and Sophia were due back, I felt so stressed that I was hit with nausea, headaches, and a loss of appetite. I took the day off and went to the hospital.
It's pretty bad. Can your family come right away?
I couldn't stop crying at the doctor's words. I was told I have cancer, and at most 6 months, maybe even just 1 month to live. I returned home, my face tear-streaked and my body shaky, and lay down on the bed. The door burst open. What are you doing skipping work? Sophia and David are working hard and you're slacking off? Her screeching worsened my headache. I didn't have the energy to respond, so I just said, I'm not feeling well, and closed my eyes. Mother-in-law didn't seem to like it either. She didn't want to leave the room and still complained to me. She continued to complain, saying things like, That's why you can't have kids. And, Who knows if you'll live long? I just kept silent, pretending to sleep. I pretended to be asleep. Then, out of nowhere, she asked about today's coffee break. Is she really this stupid? I thought, opening my eyes to see her standing over me. Grace, I'm sorry. I'm not feeling well enough to go shopping today. Could you please? She cut me off. I don't care. I want chocolate cake now. Go buy it. You're probably faking it. She screamed at me louder than ever. My frustration exploded at the woman in front of me who was selfish like a child. Shut up. Listen to me. I have 1 month to live. Go buy your own damn cake, you idiot. What? My words seemed to stun my mother-in-law, who looked at me with wide eyes. Then, from behind mother-in-law, Mom, what are you doing? And Olivia, what do you mean by 1 more month? My husband, with a pale face, and my sister-in-law, who looked equally concerned, were standing there. Weren't you coming back tomorrow? Ignoring the visibly shaken mother-in-law, my husband came to my side. I felt so relieved by his actions that I burst into tears. I can't take it anymore. The doctor says it might be cancer, and I'm not feeling well, but you keep nagging me to go buy cake. Enough is enough. Stop bothering me about the kids, too. Just leave me alone, you idiot. I let out all my resentment towards mother-in-law while crying. My husband and sister-in-law looked at mother-in-law with cold eyes. Sending a sick person to buy cake? Are you stupid? Sophia, who's usually all smiles, had a face I'd never seen before. A terrifying one. You've been making snide remarks about the kids. Look, I didn't say anything because it's a private matter, but the reason we can't have kids is me. My husband raised his voice as he said this. In reality, about a year after we got married, we consulted a doctor because we were having trouble conceiving. The test showed that I was fine, but my husband's numbers were low. He felt really down about it and kept apologizing to me with a sad face. I didn't want to make him feel that way, so I avoided talking about kids as much as possible. I did want children, but I thought life with just my husband was enough. I never considered leaving him because we couldn't have kids. I didn't tell mother-in-law because I knew she'd start nagging my husband next. I didn't want that. Mother-in-law listened to my husband's words with a face like her soul had been sucked out. Just then, my cell phone rang. The caller ID showed. It was the hospital. Hello? Yes? Right now? My husband just got home. Okay, understood. The doctor who had called earlier sounded very urgent, asking us to come right away. Am I really that sick? As I started to cry from the anxiety. It's okay, Olivia. Can you stand? I'm with you. My husband, who also looked like he was about to cry, and I rushed to the hospital. As we were leaving, I caught a glimpse of mother-in-law get a stern lecture from Sophia. When we arrived at the hospital, we were immediately ushered into a room where the doctor and even the hospital director were waiting to offer us a deep apology. A misdiagnosis? According to the doctor, they had mixed up my medical records with another patient who had the same name and birth date as me. I couldn't believe such a thing could happen, but the doctor did look extremely worn out. This incident was later covered in a local news segment, and the hospital vowed to review its working conditions. I'm not a specialist, but Olivia's symptoms might be. We were then referred to another hospital. When we returned to my in-law's house, mother-in-law seemed to have been scolded by Sophia and was shrinking in her seat. Sophia later told me she was worried that her newlywed son might lose his wife and be heartbroken. It might be love turned inside out, but it was a real hassle. Seeing our tear-streaked faces, even mother-in-law broke down. Did I really do something that bad? She started crying. So what about Olivia? Sophia asked with a concerned look. I'm pregnant, I said, tears of joy filling my eyes. My husband was also shedding tears of happiness beside me. We immediately went to the maternity hospital as advised. It's still early, but yes, you're pregnant. We can confirm the heartbeat. Hearing that, we both burst into tears, even though we were in a hospital. Sophia also cried, saying, I'm so glad, so very glad. As for what happened next, Sophia got engaged to her long-term boyfriend, and moved to another state with him after quitting her job. We had heard about this before, so it wasn't a surprise. My husband, who was taking over as the new CEO, seemed to have his hands full with client visits. The business trip, by the way, was for that reason. He told me later that he was able to come home a day early because it ended sooner than expected. Mother-in-law seemed to know nothing about it. What? Getting married? Quitting her job and moving to another state? And was shocked. Sophia told her, "Yeah, I told you, remember?" "Well, it doesn't matter. It's settled." Mother-in-law was in a daze, and we all laughed. We returned home to find our leaky roof repaired and our room looking brand new. We cheered in delight. Things remained awkward with mother-in-law. My husband was angrier than I was and said he never wanted to see her again. But mother-in-law started showing up occasionally during our coffee breaks, holding not cake, but small snacks like biscuits. She had stopped the daily cakes and jam steaks, apparently trying to be more health conscious now that she knew a grandchild was on the way. Employees who had worked there since my father-in-law was CEO seemed happy to see mother-in-law, so I realized she wasn't inherently a bad person. Our conversations gradually increased, and she stopped complaining. When our daughter Emma was born, mother-in-law transformed. She started doing things like buying diapers and leaving side dishes for dinner, saying, "Feel free to eat. You're always working so hard." Even when she knew I was home, she'd send a message and leave without ringing the doorbell. The side dishes were in a cooler, and I appreciated her thoughtfulness. I felt I could get along with this version of mother-in-law. What really convinced me was when Emma was born. Mother-in-law took my hand and said, "Thank you, Olivia. Really, thank you." Seeing her tears, I knew she was sincere. Sophia also seems to be doing well and recently announced her pregnancy. It seems like it won't be long before we all gather at the in-laws' house for a friendly meal.
My sister and niece are moving in with us. You, a stranger, should go live in some cheap apartment, Henry said, leaving me wide-eyed in disbelief. I was so shocked, my mouth hung open. Not knowing can be terrifying. This house, owned by my in-laws, is actually in my name, Lisa. While I'm okay with transferring the ownership to Henry, I can't believe I'm still paying the $3,600 mortgage on it. After thinking for a while, I smiled and said, "I can move out, but then I'd want a divorce." Henry smirked back at me. "Well, Dad's gone, and you're of no use to me anymore." He seemed almost casual about it. "Since you brought it up, don't expect any share of the property." His condescending tone made me lower my face and cover my mouth. "Okay," I replied, trembling. Hearing my shaky voice, Henry burst into laughter. "Cry all you want. Did you think I'd beg you to stay? Blame yourself for being abandoned by your husband," he taunted. Clenching my fists, I held back my tears, or rather, my laughter. Henry had no idea what was coming for him, thinking he had the upper hand. To distract myself, I thought about where I would live next. Oh, that place would be perfect. A $2 million luxury condo sprang to mind. I'm Lisa, 34 years old. My husband, Henry, is 36 and works as an administrative staff member at a private girls' high school. He's quite popular among the students, receiving multiple gifts on his birthday. Whenever this happens, he would make a face as if to say, "Give me a break." "I hope you don't make that face in front of the girls who give you those gifts," I once remarked. He just clicked his tongue in response. As if I would. But why do they give them to me, even though I wear a wedding ring? It's nice to receive from them, I said, reminiscing about my own high school days, when I had a crush on a teacher 10 years my senior. Hey. If a scandal starts in my workplace, it spreads viciously, Henry would say. That's where he's serious, thankfully. Despite the attention from young students, I never worried about him crossing the line. His earnestness must come from his father, who was a teacher too. We live with Henry's parents in their house. We planned to move out once we had kids, but unfortunately, that hasn't happened yet. I also work part-time, but we don't have much savings beyond what Henry brings in. Living with my in-laws is comfortable, they're very kind to me. My main concern now is my father-in-law's deteriorating health. He's finding it harder to walk, and he can't enjoy his beloved walks as much anymore. So, we bought a wheelchair to take him out as much as possible. I switched to a morning shift at a bakery, so I could spend the afternoons with my in-laws. My parents are no longer with us, so I treasure my in-laws like my own parents. My parents left me some inheritance, but I still wish they were here. Henry has an older sister named Kelly, for years his senior. Kelly has a husband who works for a major company and a 17-year-old daughter named Rachel. Henry and I got married 10 years ago. Back then, Kelly, who was already working, often left Rachel at our parents' house. So, I've always been close to Rachel. She adores me like a real sister. Being an only child, I was thrilled, and we still keep in touch regularly, even though she doesn't need to stay with us anymore. In contrast, Kelly and I never really got along. From the first time I met her parents, I didn't have a good impression of Kelly. The first thing she said to me was, "I thought he would choose someone cuter," and she laughed. Henry didn't defend me. If his parents hadn't been angry with Kelly at that time, I probably wouldn't have married Henry. I don't choose just by looks. What's inside matters to me for marriage. Henry later said, trying to make amends, but it didn't resonate with me. I felt his parents cared for me more as they immediately got angry on my behalf. That's when I decided I wanted to repay my in-laws for their kindness, as I couldn't do so for my own parents. Recently, Kelly often comes back home. She doesn't talk to me about it, but I overhear her talking to Henry and his parents. Apparently, Kelly and her husband are constantly fighting. Despite both working, she gets nagged for not doing enough housework. Well, if I had a part-time job like Lisa, I could handle the housework too. But I work full-time, she said snidely, glancing at me. That's how Kelly always is, comparing herself to me. She's probably been competing with me since her parents defended me when we first met. And because Henry ended up defending me, her anger only grew. Lisa only manages because her mom helps her. If she were alone, she wouldn't cope at all. Henry chimed in, and Kelly laughed. Right, Lisa doesn't even have kids and gets help from mom. It's a given Lisa can handle the household chores. Seriously, she's not even doing that well. Kelly's doing better, right? The two of them laughed at me. But when our eyes met with my mother-in-law's cold gaze, Henry quickly cleared his throat. But Lisa's really trying hard, you know. She's been taking care of Dad since his legs got bad. Ignoring Kelly's surprised look, I went to the bedroom. Worried, I called Rachel. She said calmly, "Oh, that's just Mom being unreasonable." She could do household chores while Rachel was at school, but for some reason, she didn't. From what Rachel said, it didn't seem like she was being unfairly scolded. Henry generally sides with Kelly. Kelly is competitive with me, and it seems like Henry is competitive with his brother-in-law who works at a prestigious company. But in my opinion, Henry is clearly losing. His brother-in-law contributes much more financially to his family. It's not about earning less. It's about how much of their salary they spend on their family. I don't know the exact details of Henry's income. And he doesn't seem to know or care about how much money I have or earn from my part-time job. I just wish he would contribute enough to live comfortably within his means. I don't even know what he does with the rest of his salary. Sometimes he comes home late, saying like, "Out with colleagues." Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but Henry, who dislikes being the subject of students' rumors, wouldn't cheat. At least, that's what I believed. Henry contributes $2,000 to the household. Normally, this would barely be enough to live on. This alone could be a reason for constant fights or even divorce. It's my family's house, so we don't need rent, right? But really, $2,000 is a bit. Why don't you ask your parents to contribute to the living expenses? It's not about that. It seemed like he just couldn't understand what I was trying to say. I wasn't asking him to support all three of us alone. But his words and attitude showed a lack of responsibility towards the family. You can say such things after you have kids like Kelly, he added, knowing it would hurt me. I realized then that my husband could care for his sister, but not his wife. Meanwhile, my father-in-law's legs were getting worse. Our house, surrounded by slopes, wasn't suitable for wheelchair use. Why don't we move? I proposed to my in-laws when Henry wasn't around. But the budget. We can use the money from selling this house, and I'll pay the remaining loan, I offered. My in-laws exchanged glances. But Lisa, you shouldn't have to bear such costs. You're already contributing more to the living expenses than Henry, aren't you? My mother-in-law said apologetically. It's okay, I assured her. I have an inheritance from my parents. Using it for you would make them happy. By then, I may have lost almost all my love for Henry. But I still liked my in-laws and wanted to continue living with them. We talked to Henry, and we all decided to move to a new house. We remodeled it for accessibility, with handrails installed for my father-in-law's ease. I think the new house is much more comfortable for him. In the old house, even going to the bathroom was difficult, but here, he can go safely. Initially, my in-laws were hesitant, but they relaxed when I agreed to one condition: keeping the new house in my name, without telling Henry. Also, they didn't want Henry to know about my inheritance. If Henry learns about your money, he'll rely on you even more. We can't allow that, my father-in-law said. He was trying to protect me from Henry relying on my parents' inheritance, which touched me deeply. I wish I was healthier and not such a burden, my father-in-law apologized. I waved my hands. It's not a burden at all. I look forward to our daily walks. My words were met with a warm smile from my father-in-law. Thank you. My father-in-law has lost his appetite and weight since he couldn't walk much. I hoped the new environment would help him regain his health. I truly wished for it from the bottom of my heart. Wow, what a beautiful house! Kelly exclaimed during a visit, walking around without restraint. She tapped on the handrails. But these handrails are in the way. They ruin the look. I think my father-in-law's safety is more important than how it looks. She didn't like my response and just snorted, saying nothing more. We always keep the toilet seat up to make it easier for my father-in-law. We clean regularly to avoid any odors. Lowering the seat means bending or squatting, which is hard for him. Despite explaining this to Kelly, she keeps closing it. No matter how many times I explained, she wouldn't stop. Once, I heard a loud crash from the bathroom. My father-in-law had fallen while trying to open the seat. I heard that he lost his balance while trying to open the toilet lid. I've told you not to close it, I said sternly to Kelly while helping him up. I couldn't forgive her this time, even if she was my sister-in-law. Thankfully, he wasn't seriously hurt, but that wasn't the point. But leaving the toilet lid open is unhygienic, isn't it? And it's not good for feng shui to leave it like that. That's not the point. Kelly, do you want to hurt Dad? This time, it was my usually calm mother-in-law who was angry. Mom. Kelly didn't mean any harm. Exactly. It's an exaggeration to say I would hurt Dad. Kelly laughed. But my mother-in-law's anger didn't subside. Get out, right now, she demanded, driving Kelly away. For a while, we could live in peace. But my relief was short-lived. Soon after, we discovered my father-in-law had cancer. It had already spread throughout his body by the time it was found. There was nothing we could do, and he passed away just 6 months later. After the funeral, I overheard a conversation from the living room that shocked me. Now that Dad's gone, this house will be yours, right? I wonder. Maybe it's left to Mom? Henry speculated. My mother-in-law's face tensed up too. But it's good he didn't suffer long. Caring for him would have been hard, right? Well, yeah. But we have a handy housekeeper here. Oh, that's harsh. I quickly grabbed my mother-in-law's wrist as she moved to open the living room door, shaking my head to signal her not to show her anger. Maybe Rachel and I should move in too, Kelly said cheerily inside. I'm sure I looked as angry as I felt. And I had another reason to be angry at Henry. When preparing for the funeral, I found receipts from questionable establishments while organizing his suits. There were several of them in his bag. The addresses were far away, probably thinking they wouldn't be traced back to his school or the students. The thought of him using the money he didn't bring home on such things infuriated me. By then, I was already planning how to kick Henry out of the house. My sister and niece are moving in. You, a stranger, can go live in some cheap apartment, Henry suddenly announced a few days after the funeral ended. I was stunned, unable to comprehend what he was saying. Apparently, Kelly and her husband had been fighting, and she decided to move back to her parents' house, thinking her husband would apologize and ask them to come back. Oh, I see, that's her plan. I never thought they would try to kick me out. But Henry was unaware that the house was in my name. And I've been paying the $3,600 mortgage on it. Though I had only thought of ways to get Henry out. Now I realized another option. I smiled. I'll move out, but then I want a divorce. If I were to leave, I needed a divorce, so I wouldn't be harmed in the end. But Henry, unaware of my thoughts, just grinned back. Well, now that Dad's gone, you're of no use to me, he said with a dismissive look. Since you brought it up, there won't be any division of property. His condescending tone made me lower my face and cover my mouth. Okay, I replied, trembling. Hearing my shaky voice, Henry laughed loudly. Cry all you want. Did you think I'd beg you to stay? Blame yourself for being abandoned by your husband. Clenching my fists, I struggled to hold back my laughter, knowing he had no idea what was coming for him. To distract myself from the ridiculousness of the situation, I thought about where to live next. Oh, that place would be perfect. I envisioned the $2 million luxury condo left to me by my parents. The real estate agent I hired mentioned that the family currently renting one of my properties is planning to move out soon. My parents left me several properties, and the rent from them provides me with a comfortable living. Among these, the condo, my parents' dream home, is special. I wasn't very interested in it before, but living in the last home my parents stayed in doesn't seem like a bad idea. However, I'm worried about something. If I move there, I'll end up living with my mother-in-law and Rachel. I've been racking my brain trying to find a way to rescue them from living with those two. When I leave after divorcing Henry, I'll go to a facility. My mother-in-law announced it to Henry and Kelly when I told them about my decision to leave. What? Why? Kelly's coming back to live here. Yeah. Dad will be lonely if you say things like that. Dad will be lonely? I wondered what the daughter, who said it was good that her father passed away, was thinking. But at that moment, a plan came to my mind. I whispered to my mother-in-law, making sure the other two didn't hear. If they won't let me leave, getting kicked out is the next best thing. I ended up staying in the house for a while, with the divorce as a condition, sharing a room with my mother-in-law until I found a new place to move. We executed our plan when Kelly and Rachel moved in. Hey, there's no dinner for Dad, my mother-in-law said during dinner, causing the other three to freeze. What? What are you talking about? Dad passed away. Henry was shocked, Kelly got angry, and Rachel looked worriedly at my mother-in-law. It was hard to keep Rachel in the dark, but it was necessary to not raise suspicion. How can you say such things? Apologize to Dad. It's bad luck to talk like that, right, Dad? My mother-in-law spoke to the empty chair where my father-in-law used to sit. I prepared a meal for him too, maintaining the charade. She continued to behave as if my father-in-law was still there. If you close the toilet lid, Dad will be troubled. This was to punish Kelly and Henry, who had laughed at my late father-in-law. I also wanted to see if they would take responsibility for taking care of my mother-in-law. Kelly roughly grabbed her hand and took her to his portrait. "Where's Dad?" "He's gone." "Look, there's the altar," Kelly yelled. Unfazed, my mother-in-law sat down opposite the altar. "He's right here," my mother-in-law said, her gaze toward the altar and beyond. "All your horrible words and actions, Dad is watching. Always," my mother-in-law said in a calm, cold voice. Kelly looked horrified. "Stop it," Kelly cried, leaving the room. As expected, Kelly was the first to crack. "Mom's gone senile." "But the doctor says there's nothing wrong with her, right?" "Yes. She acts completely normal in public and in front of the neighbors. It's driving me crazy." "Right. But we still have the mortgage to pay, and without Mom's pension." I overheard them whispering in the living room, as I pretended not to listen while doing the dishes. Finding a facility won't be easy, and it's expensive. "Kelly, can you afford it?" "What?" "Of course not. I have to pay Rachel's college tuition until she graduates." It seemed they were more concerned about the mortgage and money than about my mother-in-law. Such pathetic people. I turned off the tap and interrupted their conversation. "I've found a new home. I can take Mom with me until we find a good facility." They looked at each other, and I added, "And about the mortgage, I've been the one paying it." "What? Really? So that means?" Henry mumbled to himself. "The part-time income minus living expenses, that's the amount that can be paid." I thought Henry would conclude. He probably thinks, now that Kelly's income is here, we're set. Pretending not to hear, I smiled at Henry. "If Mom and I leave, I'll transfer the ownership and mortgage payments to you." "Okay," he simply replied. I felt relieved that I could protect my mother-in-law. But then a new problem, or rather, a convenient situation for us, arose. Rachel, returning home from high school, approached me with a serious look for a consultation. She suspected Kelly might be having an affair. Apparently, one of Rachel's friends saw Kelly walking arm in arm with a man in a suit at night, someone different from her husband. The friend, who knew Rachel's dad, confided in Rachel that it was definitely not her father. On further inquiry, I learned these sightings happened while Rachel was at school. Kelly's neglect of household responsibilities wasn't because she was a mother or working. It was due to her affairs during the hours Rachel was away. I assured Rachel, "Leave this matter to me," and made her promise not to tell anyone. I then quickly hired a private investigator to look into Kelly's infidelity. Maybe Kelly felt relaxed since she was separated from her husband. Or perhaps she was contemplating divorce as well. But she let her guard down too soon. They were still legally married. The evidence gathered by the investigator confirmed her affair, leading her husband to initiate divorce proceedings. Rachel was to be taken in by her father, and Kelly faced demands for child support from her husband. Relieved, my mother-in-law and I left the family home and moved into the $2 million condo. One peaceful evening, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I checked, Henry and Kelly's were there. "What do you want?" I asked, feigning ignorance. "You're not answering your phone," Henry retorted angrily. "I'll be right out," I told my worried mother-in-law, not intending to let them into the house or even past the automatic doors. I thought I'd let them off the hook if they had stayed quiet. Sighing, I went out to the entrance hall. "Let's not talk here," I suggested and drove us to a nearby cafe. In the car, Henry kept asking, "How can you afford to live in such a fancy condo?" It was left to me by my parents. I had been renting it out until now. "Why didn't you tell me something so important?" Henry demanded. I felt a twitch in my temple. Why should I? I've always contributed my share for living expenses, and this property doesn't fall under property division. After all, it was Henry who had insisted on no division of property. Upon reaching the cafe, their real concern turned out to be the mortgage of the family home. "Why is it so high? $3,600 a month!" Henry fumed in a raised voice, barely containing his desire to yell. I sipped my coffee slowly and then smiled. That's the value of living in such a house, isn't it? Don't joke around. Henry slammed the table, drawing attention. Kelly intervened, trying to calm him down. But Lisa, you should have mentioned such a high mortgage. Their desperation almost made me laugh. No sign of gratitude for all the months I had been paying that amount. You never asked. And you pretty much left the whole name change process to me, didn't you? I hinted at their unfairness. But then again, it was understandable. Kelly was facing demands for child support from Rachel's father. She had also quit her job after the affair became known at work. As far as I was concerned, it was all self-inflicted. I turned to Kelly and said with a smile, "Tough situation, huh?" "What do you mean?" "Henry doesn't contribute much to the house." "What?" Kelly looked at Henry. Feeling her gaze, he mumbled, "Well, it's not like that." "Oh, right. We've only been out of the house for a few days." I realized she hadn't caught on yet. Henry warned me in a low voice, "Don't say unnecessary things." "What do you mean?" Kelly's eyes turned to me, demanding an explanation. I shrugged and pulled out several papers from my bag. "He only put in $2,000 and spent the rest at places like these," I said, laying out dubious receipts on the table. "What is this? You've been going to these kinds of places?" Kelly expressed her disgust and outrage, reading the names of the establishments aloud. "You're an idiot! That's disgusting!" Kelly's outburst, after tossing away the receipts, seemed to hit a nerve with Henry. "What are you talking about? You're the one who's disgraceful, having an affair with a colleague." Their ugly spat unfolded right before me, making me want to tell them they were both equally to blame. As they argued, I quietly observed, sipping my coffee. Judging that a complaint from the cafe might be imminent, I spoke to Henry. "Oh, right. Sorry about that," I said, prompting him to stop arguing with Kelly. There was a sense of alertness in his tone, recognizing that he should be cautious. "What?" he asked, sounding probing. "I forgot to mention, there's a popular recreation center near this cafe." "Huh?" They both looked at me puzzled, not grasping my point yet. "Many students hang out here after school." I leaned in and whispered to Henry. "See, familiar uniforms everywhere. I wonder how many of them are here." Suddenly, Henry stood up with a loud noise, noticing the gazes of the girls around us. I could hear their giggling. My choice of this cafe had finally sunk in for him. "Just so you know, I didn't raise my voice." Standing, Henry looked down, trembling. His hand on the table was clenched so tightly it turned white. "Thanks for embarrassing yourself. School tomorrow should be interesting," I said, leaning in and grinning at him. He collapsed to the floor in defeat. Eventually, the family home was put up for sale, and Henry and Kelly moved to an old, small apartment. Kelly struggled to find a new job, and Henry resigned from the girls' school. Apparently, there were complaints from parents about inappropriate staff members. Even if the phone call hadn't come, Henry would have likely resigned, but the call spread the rumors even further. The reason I knew about this was that one of Rachel's friends attended the school where Henry worked and shared the news. As Henry feared, the story spread wildly. Hearing this from Rachel, my mother-in-law shook her head in disgust, and I couldn't help but laugh. Once, Henry and Kelly came begging for help, relying on my inheritance and my mother-in-law's pension. They apologized profusely, but I quickly sent them away, saying, "No need for apologies now." I continue to live with my mother-in-law. And Rachel often visits our condo. She loves the view from the windows as much as I do. We spend our days looking out at the vast sky my parents once admired. With the curtains wide open, we enjoy our meals, feeling on top of the world. I cherish this life, hoping to show the filial piety to my mother-in-law that I couldn't show to my parents.